So welcome, everybody. I've been looking forward to this very much. I'm going to say a few words of introduction. And are you hearing that, or is that just me? Is that echoey sound?
It's coming from Karen Copenhaver. Her computer is not muted.
Can you mute Charlie?
Now muted. We're good.
Thank you. Of course, you get feedback from your own family, right? Does it? So I've been very much looking forward to these times together. A few kind of words of disclosure. I'm a member of Church of Christ at Dartmouth College, and I'm an ordained United Church of Christ minister, former pastor, and seminary president. I have no background in art history. I never took a single art history class, but I've been a lifelong lover of Rembrandt and of the Bible, and particularly the ways in which those two illuminate one another. So I'm eager for this time, because I've not had the opportunity to explore this with many people along the way. It was billed in one of the blurbs of publicity as a lecture, and I will impart some information, but it's not really a lecture. I anticipate that we'll have some interactive time. We'll be looking at various works of art, and one of my favorite questions will be, what do you notice? Not that you need to know more than what you notice, but to train our eye to look at these works together. And I want to do that collectively. So today we're going to do a kind of an introduction and then look at some Hebrew Bible passages and the artwork from Rembrandt that correspond to those passages. Looking ahead, next week, we're going to look at Rembrandt's self-portraits, and particularly the self-portraits that are embedded in biblical scenes. Rembrandt liked to put himself in the action, and it's very interesting to see where he does that, and what it says both about the scene and about Rembrandt as a person and a believer. The third week, we're going to look at Jesus and the humanity of Jesus through Rembrandt, and the ways in which he illumines the character, life, and being of Jesus. And then the fourth session, appropriately enough, as we approach Easter, we'll look at some works on crucifixion and resurrection, which was very much of a focus from Rembrandt. So Rembrandt van Rijn, I'll just say a few words. Among the most familiar, famous artists of history. Born in 1606, died 1669. To put that in just some kind of rough context, that means that he was born in his early life about 100 years after Martin Luther attacked the 95 Theses on the door of the Wittenberg Church, beginning what we call the Reformation. About 100 years after Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel ceiling, and exactly contemporaneous with 1619, when the first slaves were brought to the New World. So just kind of roughly situate Rembrandt. He was clearly a lover of the Bible. When he died, the only possession that was left, because he had financial troubles his whole life, was a family Bible. It was the only thing that he owned. His probably learned his love of the Bible from his mother. There are a number of, and we'll look at a couple of those today, of his mother reading the Bible. And extraordinarily prolific as an artist. Roughly about 3,000 works are his or attributed to him, and there are always some questions about whether this is Rembrandt himself or Rembrandt's school that did some of these works. I'm not qualified to respond to those, although I think that the works we're looking at are by consensus considered Rembrandt's hand. But of those works, an extraordinary number of them deal with biblical themes. So that of the 650 paintings, I mean, imagine that in a career, 650 paintings, 145 of those are from the Bible. And of the 300 etchings, 70 of those are from the Bible. And of the 1,500 drawings we have, 575 are from the Bible. What's even more extraordinary about that is that this was a time, Rembrandt was working in a time when there were not many commissions for religious works. So clearly he was doing a lot of this out of his own sense of interest and need to explore biblical themes. Particularly think of the drawings, they were never intended to be seen in public. So his drawings, 300 or 575 from the Bible, were more like a visual diary or spiritual journal kept in graphic form for his own purposes. Many of the portraits of Jesus that he did were not commissioned by anyone and remained in his studio until his death. And we can ponder and consider what that meant to him to do those paintings and to keep them in close proximity. He did not represent any particular church, although he was a Protestant. The Dutch Reformed Church was his church. His children were baptized there. He was married there, but he was not a church goer. In fact, he scandalized the church when his first wife died, and he cohabitated with his maid for many years. And so he was looked down upon by the upstanding people of Leiden in the Netherlands, where he was, and then in Amsterdam, where he moved. His mother was brought up Catholic, but converted to Protestantism. And there's a kind of Protestant sensibility that I think we see in Rembrandt's work, in that at the time there were a sort of an established canon of biblical stories that would be depicted in art, a kind of limited canon. And within that, kind of established ways in which those events and stories would be represented. And Rembrandt just blew that apart and said, no, I'm going to look at every corner of the Bible that interests me. I'm going to have my own interpretation. Nobody's going to tell me how to represent this story. And so there's a tremendous amount of creativity and out of a kind of a freedom of this notion that every person can have their own encounter with the Bible and their own interpretation of the Bible. Other than that, there were no particular schools of thought he didn't represent, like ideological thought or theological thought. He was, we'll see some certain themes along the way, but he was very much of an individual in his own interpretation, and covers so much of scripture in his work, and we're going to look at just a small sampling in these weeks, that he's one of the very few artists you could think of that you could do an illustrated Bible with his work, because whether from Genesis through Revelation, there are works that are represented in his oeuvre. Really quite extraordinary. So here we're going to I'm going to share the screen. There we go. Can you all see that?
Mhm.
Yes.
This is one of Rembrandt's self-portraits. He was very prolific in his self-portraits, up to 90. I say up to because some, again, are questions. But, okay.
No, this one. No,
Oh, what?
that's good enough.
Okay. About 90 self-portraits. He was obsessed with two faces, his own and the face of Jesus. We'll get to the face of Jesus in our third time together, but this is one of his self-portraits, and it's also one of those embedded self-portraits. We'll look at this again tomorrow or next week, rather, at least briefly, because this is Rembrandt as a self-portrait as the Apostle Paul. He is assuming the countenance of the Apostle Paul. And this was painted later in his career. He was 55 years old, but that very distinctive face we see in all these other self-portraits, we'll look at some of those in other sessions. But he's putting his own countenance on the figure of St. Paul, which says to me that he had a strong identification with Paul, and we can conjecture as to why Paul of all people. In fact, I might ask that question of you if you have a thought about that. But you'll see him with an open Bible there, with the word there, and you can't see it too well, but in the lower part of this painting, you'll see the handle of a sword, which is another symbol for Paul in Ephesians chapter 6. Is to take the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God, as a way of describing the Bible as a sword of the Spirit. Also, it was, I gather, which I just learned, that it was common to depict saints with the instrument of their death. In Paul's case, it was a sword that he was executed with. He was not crucified because he was a Roman citizen, but he was killed by a sword, and there's a reminder of that here in this portrait. So I wonder if anyone would like to hazard a word or just an observation. What do you notice, particularly, and again, there are no wrong answers here, or no right answers necessarily, but what do you notice about his countenance, his face, and what that might say about Paul and or about Rembrandt?
He doesn't seem to be happy.
Yeah, they don't seem to be happy. Yeah. Paul was not a particularly jolly fellow, I think. But Rembrandt at this point had seen a lot. He'd buried a number of children, his beloved first wife. He'd gone bankrupt several times. He'd seen a lot at this point, and those the eyes to me look something like the world-weary eyes. Anyone else?
His eyebrows are raised. It seems like he may be surprised but not shocked, or he's thinking of something. There's maybe something new happening.
Surprised if not shocked. That's great. I like that, Mark. Thank you. Interesting. Anyone else?
Just that the whole thing is very dark, and maybe a lot of his paintings are that way, but
yeah.
Other than the little bit of light that seems to maybe be shining on his face through a window or whatever, candle window, it's just very.
Yeah, that's really interesting you mentioned that, because Rembrandt was famous for his use of contrast, light and dark, and it's important to pay attention to where the light is and where the dark is. We'll see that in some of these other slides that come up, but here the light in his face is that much more prominent because of the darkness that surrounds it seems, and then the light on the Bible as well, but not fully illuminated. It's which may or may not be significant, but the face is definitely what comes through here.
It's his shadow. He's casting a shadow on the Bible.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, interesting.
He
Well,
looks,
yeah,
he looks kind of, questioning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's right. I think and Paul was he talked about himself as an imperfect instrument, and I think this I think that may be some of what Rembrandt identified with as an imperfect instrument of God, and as an interpreter of the gospel.
Yeah, I guess in fact he's turning towards the light, but he's not facing it.
Interesting. That's another interesting observation, because we'll see that elsewhere too. Kind of the way the body turns, and which can be significant. Okay, very good. Let's move on. This is a painting that Rembrandt did of, thought to be his mother was the model. Again, his mother was the one who seems to have introduced him to his love of the Bible. And we have very few facts about Rembrandt's life, by the way. And we have almost as much by court records and that sort of thing, and some church records as anything. But here, his mother, and again, the light and the dark, her face is almost out of focus. I mean, it's kind of obviously it's a worn face, an older face. But what strikes me here is the hand is what gets the focus, and the hand is depicted beautifully and in a way that I gather from artists that hands are particularly difficult to paint for whatever reason. I'm not an artist, so I don't know why, but that's really quite remarkable. And the hand is lit because it's maybe by the same light that's on the Bible there. But it shows her love of the Bible and the kind of devotion that he witnessed in his mother. What else do you notice?
Yeah, she's almost touching it like she would touch someone you love. It's just looks like she's touching it very tenderly.
Yeah, I think that's a great word, tenderly. Yeah, that's right. This is not a casual reader. She is approaching it, but tenderly. I think it maybe, is it too much to say with some reverence? We don't know what this, you can imagine art scholars have tried to figure out what on earth this is. It has sort of a vaguely Hebrew look about it, but there's nothing, there's no particular passage that's open here. Now here, I'll move to the next one. It's another picture of a woman reading. And this is quite different, isn't it? And some of these reproductions here, I apologize, are better than others. This is not one of the better ones, but what do you notice here?
The Bible is reflecting the light.
Yeah. Yeah. Almost like illuminated. We talk about illuminated manuscripts. I know that means something else, but this one seems illuminated.
Bob, it almost seems like the light is coming from the Bible.
Right. That's what I mean.
Exactly. Exactly. Notice how her face is framed by the hat too. It all kind of points. Even that hat points to the script in front of her. What about the expression?
It looks a little bit like she's in awe.
Yeah.
I would say.
And may have some, awe and a little quizzical maybe.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Martin, I think to me, it looks like she's almost asking, how do you measure up to this passage?
That's good. So yeah, maybe not quizzical as much as kind of a little intimidated. Oh, that's interesting. By the way, I not being an art scholar, I don't have a lot of contrast with other artists' works here. If you had a different person leading this, you'd have all sorts of rich counter references, which I don't have here. But I love this painting. It just in her concentration, it invites my own concentration.
Again, it looks like there was a lot of attention put to the hands, a little detail, and I'm not sure what that means, but
Yeah. Yeah, the hands again, that, yeah, different use of the hands. The last one, let's see if I can go back here just to look at this. You said tender, that the hands tender there and the reading. But you come here and at least the left hand, it's like holding on for dear life.
Well, it's both holding up the Bible and grasping it.
And grasping it. Yeah, that's a good word. Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. So now we're going to move to the first Hebrew Bible image. And actually, just let me ask you, because do you recognize what this is immediately?
is that
Looks like a
Jacob
wrestling match.
with the
Looks like a
angel?
wrestling match. Yeah, well, right. Well, you got that.
It looks
So
like
this-
the person is, it looks like the man is dying. His eyes are closed and the angel's kind of holding him.
No.
Yeah.
No? I don't know.
I think he's about to have his hip go out of joint.
Yeah, we have a ringer in our midst. Yes, that's right. Yeah. So this is Rembrandt's interpretation of Jacob wrestling with the angel.
Okay.
Now, let me. But I asked you if you know what you thought it was first before saying that, because it's an unusual depiction in some ways. But we'll get to that in a second. So, this is a particularly large painting that's in Berlin, and if you recall the Genesis story, if not, you might want to look back at Genesis 25 to 32. This kind of epic story where Jacob is born a twin, and he was born. His brother Esau was born first, but they wrestled in the womb. and when Esau was born, Jacob was holding Esau's ankle as coming from the womb. They were grappling to the end, trying to be the firstborn, or grappling from the beginning to be the firstborn, maybe I should say. And so Jacob means literally, he takes by the heel. And the two of them, Jacob and Esau, struggled their whole lives, and Jacob never could reconcile himself to the fact that he was not the firstborn, because the firstborn in that time and culture had great privileges. And so, as just quickly kind of retell the story, because I think you'll recall it, that Esau was a hunter, and Jacob was more of a domestic type, would stay around the tents, and Esau would go out hunting. But Esau came back hunting once and was very hungry, and Jacob said, "I'll give you a pot of lentil stew if you'll give me your birthright." And Esau was so hungry that he said he would. And then as a further usurpation of Esau's role, when Jacob disguised himself as Esau by putting some animal skins on his arms. So you have the hairy arms of Esau, and went to his father, who was very old and almost blind at the time, and asked for his blessing. And so received Isaac's blessing mistakenly, by deception, by saying, "No, I am Esau," and in that time and culture, again, a word that was spoken like that could not be taken back. It was irrevocable. And so Esau was understandably angry and sought to kill Jacob. And Jacob was warned by his mother to get out of there. And so he left and left to go spend some time cooling his heels with his uncle Laban and tending Uncle Laban's flocks at some distance away in Mesopotamia. In any case, there were two famous encounters, one as he left, as Jacob left, and the other as he returned. The famous encounter when he left was when he slept and he had a dream of the ladder, made famous by the hymn that we sung through our lives, climbing Jacob's ladder, a ladder that extended from earth to heaven, and God's angels were ascending and descending on that ladder, and it came as a revelation to Jacob, and he said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. Surely this is the very house of God, and he named it Bethel, which means house of God. So then when he thought it was safe after years of being with his uncle Laban to go back and to reconcile with Esau, as he approached Canaan and when he would see Esau in the night, he wrestled with, it says, first a man. This is very, it's not meant to be it's meant to be rich with imagery and meant to be ambiguous. Who was this one that he was wrestling with? Was it a man? Was it the angel? Was it God? And wrestled all night. And indeed, he said, I will not cease wrestling with you until I get your blessing. And the angel then smote, what's the past tense? Smites the thigh of Jacob, and he limped from then on to as a reminder of that encounter. So that's all to say. That's to remind you, or to tell you that epic story. And by the way, Jacob was given a new name after that encounter. When in the Hebrew Bible, when you have a life-changing event, you often have a change of name, and in this case, his name was changed to Israel. Jacob became known as Israel. So, given that, I've seen many depictions of this event, wrestling with the angel. But let's go back to this image now. Given that story, what do you notice in the image?
I'm not sure about given the story, but while I thought this was the depicting the wrestling with the angel, the more I looked at it, the angel, the hands of the angel again, looked to be holding him fairly tenderly, and actually supporting his head lest he bump it on the rock or something. So I found that different than, it didn't look like a wrestling match.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And the and the expression on the angel's face is tender, I would say. Would you concur with that, or do you see something else?
I would agree with that. They don't look
I mean,
like they're wrestling to me.
I'm sorry, say that again, please, Gail.
They don't look like they're wrestling to me.
No, it almost looks like a lover's embrace to me.
Right. Or he's injured. Maybe it's right after the leg has been broken or damaged, and
yeah.
tenderly now putting him down.
Oh, that's interesting.
An awkward dance.
Yeah. Huh.
Jacob almost seems like a child apologizing for something.
Yes. So sorry to have done that, Jacob. So sorry to do that. Interesting. And I think that, I'm not an expert in angels' wings, but it seems like the extended wings are, in giving a blessing, you extend your arms, and I imagine if you're an angel, you extend your wings. It's a kind of fullness of blessing is my sense of that. But let's look at Jacob's expression there. It's in profile, obviously, so we can limit in what we can see. But what do you notice there? He doesn't look in agony. Looks, I don't know what, almost peaceful, would you say?
Yeah, or asleep, like it's a dream.
Like it's a dream. Yeah,
His eyes are definitely closed. From
like
what-
it's a dream. Like it's a dream. Yeah, because again, this whole account is kind of mysterious. Is it God? Is it man? Is it an angel? Is he awake? Is he asleep? Is it a dream? Is it reality? Is it vision? It's not made clear.
He's holding on to the angel, but not angrily looking.
Yeah.
And he's looking beyond the angel, actually. If his eyes are open at all, he's not even looking at the angel.
Interesting. So those two events that I mentioned in Jacob, both as he was leaving Canaan to escape the wrath of Esau, and as he's coming back, we have those two kind of revelatory events, those two times and places where there's an earthly, heavenly encounter. There's kind of the intersection of heaven and earth. In one case, it's the ladder with the angels ascending and descending. In this case, it's wrestling with the angel. Any other thoughts before we move on?
Well, the angel's foot appears to be on the ground, and above you see the sky, and so, maybe he's laying him down or setting him down, or, if you're talking about the two, between the earth and the sky, there's both elements in the picture.
Yeah. And here again, where Rembrandt chooses to put the light is really interesting and significant. Here it's on the angel's face, the angel's gown. Yeah. Well, we'll move on here. Now, here's another, at the other end of Jacob's life. Now, this is a story that you may not be as familiar with, and it's an interesting story. The old man in this scene, it's a deathbed scene, is Jacob at the end of his life, and seated next to him is his son Joseph, and this is Joseph's wife Asenath, and then Joseph's two sons, Ephraim, who's the one to the right, and Manasseh. Now, this is an interesting story. It's and Rembrandt takes some liberties with it. But by the way, for you grandparents out there, this is the only scene in the Bible with a living grandparent and grandchild interaction. Is this scene where Jacob blesses his grandsons? So the story is that Jacob is very old at this point. This story, by the way, if you want to look it up later, Genesis 48, we're still in Genesis. That Jacob is old, and Joseph brings his sons to be blessed by the great patriarch. Now, the blessing was the first blessing, which was traditionally given with the right hand, was to be given to the oldest child. Sound familiar, right? With Jacob, when he was a little one, wanted to be recognized as the oldest child and stole his birthright to be able to be recognized as an oldest child. Well, in this case, Jacob starts to bless the second son, Ephraim, the one that's on the right. And as the story goes, Joseph was upset and said, no, the blessing is for Manasseh. He's the older one. And Jacob says, to paraphrase, well, he'll have a blessing too. He will be father to a great people too. but the first blessing goes to Ephraim. So here is one, Jacob, who was a second son and received a blessing out of order, as it were, giving a blessing to his grandson out of order. Now, there's and notice the way that Ephraim, kind of the pious gesture of his arms crossed. Do you see that? And then, and he's kind of leaning into the, leaning into the blessing. Now, you may not be able to see this too well on your screen, but can you see the wrist of Jacob, the right arm, the wrist there? Can you see Joseph's fingers there underneath it, underneath Jacob's wrist? Now, in the Genesis account, it's clear that Joseph was not pleased that Jacob was going to give a blessing to Ephraim rather than Manasseh. But here, it's kind of ambiguous that it doesn't look like he's pulling the hand away. It's kind of more gentle, almost like he's supporting the hand. I don't know. That's, again, this is all open to interpretation, and maybe maybe you might see it differently. Oh, by the way, in the biblical story, Joseph's Egyptian wife, Asenath, is not in the story, but Rembrandt didn't want to leave her out. Thought she should have a place in the story as well, even though she's kind of more of a bystander. But what do you notice here, and particularly that hand and Joseph? What do you think?
Yeah, it does look like he's just kind of guiding the hand or supporting it. And he's also smiling, so he doesn't look like he's upset.
Yeah.
Seems to have a smile on his face.
Or he's trying to keep it from touching the head and moving it somewhere else.
Yeah, he's not slapping it back. That's right.
No, he's just gently, we're going to redirect it.
Yeah. Yeah, and the expression is just interesting, and there's a question whether Rembrandt was taking some of the conflict, some of the tension out of the scene by making it a kind of a happy family scene in a way that is a little different than the Genesis account. Anything else you notice to point out?
Well, the person doing the blessing is not looking at the person being blessed.
Yeah, that's right. Well, he's quite old. Again,
Is he blind?
probably mostly blind.
The lighting is coming again from the left to the right, and it is focused on Jacob, but
Yeah.
with lighting it on both of the other adult figures, as on each one of the faces as well, but not quite the intensity as it is on the focus of the lighting on Jacob.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Terry. And if you look to the left and then to the right, you got the light and the dark, and so the light is clearly emanating from Jacob's side of the scene there, the great patriarch. Okay, we'll move on here. That we're now in Exodus. Now, this is Moses, obviously, with the Ten Commandments. But what do you notice here?
Light's not on the commandments.
I'm sorry, Bob?
The light is not on the commandments.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Don't you think Moses is angry?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I really wrestled with this one. In a minute, I'll share some of my own theories about this. But yeah, that's how do you read the expression on Moses' face here?
I think he looks disappointed and he's going to throw those tablets down.
You know?
Which he does, right?
Well, this is, yeah, he
Breaks
does.
the
I mean,
first set.
This is when the golden calf was.
Yeah, I don't know.
so he does. I think disappointed is right. I don't see anger really. I mean, if it is anger, it's pretty well controlled. Just to notice the way that between the tablets and his arms, how his face is framed. I mean, that it kind of emphasizes his face, doesn't it?
And it almost looks as though there's a light coming from the commandments onto his head.
Yeah. Backlit. That's a word. That's fascinating. So, I'm sorry, go ahead. Mhm.
Those aren't tablets, that's a Kindle.
The commandments heavy. They look like he's having to really hold them up there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. So to remind you of this story, so so Moses goes up the mountain and is given the stone tablets and with the commandments, and comes down and sees the people worshiping the golden calf, and Moses is so distraught and upset with the people that he dashes the tablets to the ground, and they shatter, right? And so one possible interpretation, and I think the interpretation most often given, this is that moment. I mean, he's just like, it's the moment before he throws the tablets to the ground. But there is, and I've not seen much evidence for this interpretation, but I'm gonna float it anyway, because after he breaks the tablets, after a time, not immediately, but he goes back up the mountain and gets new tablets. And when Moses comes down, obviously the people are in a different place. They got the message. They got the memo, no golden calf, we're not going to worship idols. And it says that Moses' face glowed. And there was it glowed with the glory of God. And so much so that the people needed to wear a veil so that the people weren't overwhelmed. So anyway, I'm wondering if this is that second trip down the mountain, and he's holding up the commandments, saying, "Okay, folks, here we go. Now I'm giving you another chance." Now, and there's kind of a plaintive look on his face to me, and that glow, I don't know. There's a certain glow to his face. What do you think?
Yeah, I suppose it could be either. We'll never know.
That's right. We
Rembrandt
will
didn't
never
tell
know.
us, right?
Right. And Rembrandt didn't interpret his own work. He didn't.
A third interpretation could be he's still up on the mountain. This is the second set he's given. And he's just very thankful to God for giving the people a second chance.
I like that.
And he's looking very humble.
I like that.
Gracious, thanking God.
Yeah. Yeah, isn't it wonderful how Rembrandt sort of avoids the obvious? So his expression, you could picture him, obvious anger. That would be the obvious choice for something here, but doesn't go for that. At least not anger as we might normally think it would be expressed. There's one other thing to a point. I'm sorry, go ahead. Tom, go ahead.
Oh, the body language is he's leaning forward as if he's about to cast them down, smash them.
Yeah.
And his face is not happy for sure. I don't know.
No, it's not happy. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. So there's one other thing to point out here. Can you see the tufts of hair in the front, like right over his forehead, these tufts of hair? Two red tufts. It's an interesting tradition, and you may have seen, and if after this time you can go online and look at Michelangelo's famous sculpture of Moses with the Ten Commandments that's at St. Peter's in Rome. And there's this curious detail that the Moses has two little horns. And it was true in other works of art as well. Moses given horns. And you say, wow, what on earth is that all about? Well, it's a really quirky story that has to do with translation and faulty translation. That in ancient Hebrew, there wasn't a term for rays of light. And so it would, the word that was used to describe that would be horns, like a ray is something like a horn, I guess. But then in the translation in the Septuagint, which was the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, it talked about Moses being glorified, that visual glow, the glorification of on Moses' face. But that was lost with the next translation, which is the Vulgate to the Latin, and it went back to horns. That Moses had not a visual glow, but had horns. And so for a number of centuries, that mistaken translation was translated into graphic pieces. And here, I mean, with Michelangelo's statue, it's quite obvious, but here it's merely a suggestion, I think, of something that looks maybe not like a horn, but horn-like. Alrighty, we're gonna move on. This is one of Rembrandt's great pieces, considered one of his masterpieces. This hangs in the Louvre. It's a large piece. We want to look at the biblical reference here. It's 2 Samuel, and this is Bathsheba. And you'll recall that King David saw Bathsheba taking a bath from a tower, and decided he must have her, and sent her husband Uriah to the front lines to die in battle, so that he could. And this is this particular scene is not one that's told in Scripture. She's holding a letter. It's thought to be a letter from David that's summoning her. Wow. That expression, what do you make of that expression? What do you notice there? Expression on her face. What do you think it bespeaks?
Resignation.
But yeah, I think resignation and a sadness too, I think.
Mm.
I think she's obviously depicted naked here in part as a reminder of that other part of the story where she was taking a bath. It also just makes her more vulnerable, doesn't it?
It just feels to me like she's watching the woman dry her feet. And it's it doesn't give me any other sense of what she's thinking.
Interesting. Well, I gather that there's x-rays done of this painting show that in an earlier version, her head was more upright, that she was looking more forward, and that this downward gaze was a later thought of Rembrandt's. So is she looking down because she's looking at the woman? Is she looking down because she's downcast? And by the way, yeah, go ahead.
She's gripping the letter, it appears as though she fairly recently looked at it, and now she's going over it in her head. How can I don't want to do this, but how can I avoid
Yeah.
what the king says?
Contemplating her fate. I mean, this is an ancient Me Too moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She feels she's caught in the middle between her husband and the king. What is she going to do? It'd be nice to know what the letter says.
Yeah, it might be horrifying too, actually. And scripture does not make reference to a letter. This is Rembrandt's interpretive move here. And what is it, and often with the depictions of David and Bathsheba, you have a depiction of David somewhere, maybe in a distance in the tower, shadowy figure, or more than that. What does it mean to not have David in this scene at all?
Maybe that's why he put the letter there,
Yeah.
depicting David, the fact that she's got a letter in his hand.
Yeah.
in his hand.
So David has a presence there through the letter.
Perhaps.
Yeah. I also, this may be too much to say, but I also think, David is the great, powerful king, and whose presence would would overshadow everyone and everything. So this is giving Bathsheba, at least, that this is the respect of having the focused attention of the viewer, and not in the presence of that king.
Reduced to a sheet of paper.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Well, we're coming to our last, which is perfect, because we're going to be ending on time in these sessions, which is 5 o'clock. I want to be true to that time. This is the last one we'll look at here. And by the way, this is a very small painting. You don't get a sense of the scale of these by having them on the slides. The last one is quite large, like 4 feet by 4 feet. This one is not much larger than a piece of printer paper. And this is Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah, lamenting over the destruction of Jerusalem. Jeremiah was the prophet who decried the idolatry of the people of Israel and the greed of the priests, the false prophets, who the book of Lamentations is attributed to him, probably not written by him, but this idea of his lamenting the way the people have gone. And now Jerusalem, you see burning in the distance. Can you see it on the left? The destruction of Jerusalem in 586, before the Common Era, 586. And there's something really poignant about this old man at this point, having seen so much, because when he was called to be a prophet by God, he protested and said, "I'm only a child and do not know how to speak." So here he is many, many years later, having been a prophet and seen all the worst of what he anticipated and feared happening to his beloved Jerusalem. What do you notice here?
What is the object there that's the light?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure there's it may be, because he uses in his prophecies, uses the image of a pot, a broken pot, and that can't be put back together again, as an image for what will happen to the people. And I don't know, I looked at this and is that a broken pot?
It does look like that.
Yeah.
It's like there's two pieces sitting in that larger container bowl.
Yeah.
Going.
It's a very sad, it gives me a very sad feeling, and he's exhausted from all of the years that he spent trying to bring the message, and now Jerusalem is burning, and he's just very sad.
So I think that's exactly right. So this chapter 19 of Jeremiah, verse 10, then you shall break the jug in the sight of those who go with you, and shall say to them, thus says the Lord of hosts, so I will break this people in this city as one breaks a potter's vessel, so that it can never be mended. I mean, that's a whole. Yeah. So you wonder if that is the potter's vessel. That's the best I can come up with for what that is, what that object is.
The focus
Once
is on
again,
the
the
broken
lighting is
vessel, not-
amazing.
The focus is on the broken vessel and not the burning of Jerusalem, though.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. And it's a curious composition here too, because you see it's like he's in a cave over, but then his back is to something like a gigantic column. So it's not clear. But then again, the shadows, the light, and where is the light here? The light is in the fire. The light is on if that is a pot, is on his face, and then the shadow that he cast on the column, and then the shadow that earthen vessel of some kind, that pot, casts on the column. Quite something. Well, gosh, I hope the hour went quickly for you. It certainly did for me. I'll see, how do I unshare? How do I get out of this now? Stop share. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us today. I would invite you to join us for these other times. We'll be digging in this way with various works. Again, I said next week we'll be looking at Rembrandt's self-portraits, and particularly those that are embedded in biblical scenes. I think you'll find that fascinating.